Absolute evil is like 0% of good. And the less that we have of good, the less substantial that we ourselves are. So the further we are from God, we're not only just more evil or more removed from God or in a further country, we actually become less substantial. Our very essence becomes less. And the further we fall away from God, the less real we are.
Father Michael's specialty, he's also a priest. He's been a priest for decades,
31 years. Yep.
31
30
years.
plus. Yeah.
And it's Holy Transfiguration, correct? The
Correct.
name of your church, Holy Transfiguration, Livonia, Michigan. I
Mm-hmm.
helped him on what he's going to speak on tonight. I helped in his retreat, the Prodigal Son, and a great retreat and really great words. Works. He's also specializes in men who are stuck. Okay, he's a great, great coach. I've referred men to him because I know that they're going to be treated well. That can't quite find their way and need some coaching and need some encouragement, need some direction. That's Father Michael's specialty, and he's very, very good at it. So if any of you fit into that category, you might consider looking at his website. A
Thank you.
lot of experience, as I said, with dealing with men, and he's going to share some of that, some of his experience and the things he's learned with us tonight. Father Michael.
All right. Thank you. I do appreciate it. Pardon me. Gary had asked me at the beginning of my talk tonight to say a little bit about my son, Christopher. You know, he was put in the announcements on the Telegram group. This is not my usual um, background. I'm in a Airbnb about 2 hours from home in Grand Rapids, Michigan. My younger son, Christopher, was involved in an accident over the weekend. He was out camping with a group of friends and was hit by a ricocheting bullet that passed through his lower abdomen, front to back. He was about 20 miles out in the middle of the wilderness at the end of a dirt road in the woods without even any cell phone reception, and his four buddies picked him up and threw him in the back of a Jeep and managed to get him to a local hospital, which was inadequate for what he needed, but they got him stabilized in an ambulance and brought him into Grand Rapids. 5 hours of surgery by the trauma team. It shattered the top of his left hip bone. He lost about a third of his colon, and he's going to make it. He'll be okay in time. But it's 2 days after his surgery now, so second day after surgery, you always feel perfectly wretched and miserable, but um, he will be okay. But at any rate, so I'm a little tired, and I've been mildly distracted. I've been majorly distracted because I almost lost my boy, and that's like one of the worst nightmares that a father can have. But it's all okay, and it's much better now. So, at any rate, I appreciate the opportunity to distract myself with all of you. So, thank you for being here and for giving me an opportunity um, to busy myself with something to take my mind off of my worries. Um, yes, there is. Oh, thank you. Yes, there is the GoFundMe if you find it in your heart. He and his wife are nearly 5 months pregnant. And like all of the money, Christopher had been working 2 jobs to raise money for in anticipation of my first grandson. Now, all of that is, of course, spent on medical expenses. So if you're able to contribute a little something, that would be beautiful. And the information on the GoFundMe site is accurate and the need is real. So enough about that. Um, tonight, what I think I entitled this like the Prodigal Son, the director's cut. So as Father Hans said, I did I gave some talks on the Prodigal Son parable at a retreat about 3 weeks ago, at which some of you, I think I have not looked through the list of attendees. I hope some of you perhaps were present there. We had a really good time. And I think the presentation was good, but I'll repeat some of that here and maybe in a little more depth. Um, um, as always, it's maybe been a while since I've been on one of these calls. I really enjoy interacting with you guys, so don't let this be just simply a one-sided presentation of me just talking to you. If you've got a comment or question, raise your hand. I do have notes that's going to be covering part of the screen, so I'm on a laptop. I don't have all of the monitors that I typically do. So all that's to say, if you got a comment, just unmute yourself and ask me. Okay, I'm not even going to be able to pay close attention to the chat. I'll try to do that while I talk, but I don't mind the interruption. And if you've got a question, I'd rather deal with your questions and talk about what you find is important or interesting rather than me simply babbling on and telling you what I think you might find interesting. All right? So if you'd be willing to do that for me, we'll dive into it a bit here. So, as I say, we talked about the prodigal son, and there are a few aspects of the parable that I found just absolutely fascinating when I first came through it. We remember them, the beginning of it. The man had two sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that fall to me. So he divided to him his livelihood. Portion of good, meros tis usias, which is an interesting thing. Meros, portion tis usias. Usias, the word for goods or property, um, is ousia, which can be taken in that sense of property or possessions or whatnot. But ousia is the word for essence, which the fathers, like of the Council of Nicaea, used to understand the nature of God. So we say God is one essence in three persons. The word for one essence is mia ousia. So the fundamental meaning of the word is essence. So it says, give me the portion of the essence that falls to me. And so he asked what belonged to him, and he asked for it. The problem was typically dad wasn't dead yet, and he's asking for his inheritance. So on the one hand, this is kind of a screw you to dad, but the fathers see in here that it wasn't just that he asked for something at the wrong time, but that he wanted to possess something on his own that was properly a gift. You see, in those days, an heir to property had full use of the property, but except he couldn't dispose of it. He couldn't sell the property or alienate it in any way. He had full use of it, but the property had to stay with the estate or with his father. And the younger son, what he's doing is asking to be able to possess on his own something that he properly should receive as a gift from his father. And what we see in this fundamental attitude is reflected nowadays in what we call individualism. That is, we want to have on our own terms, in our own way, according to our own desires, things that properly are given to us by God. And rather like in the parable of the 10 lepers, we take for granted all of the gifts that God has given to us, and we don't often think to give thanks. We don't often acknowledge, like we do at the end of every liturgy, when the priest says, every good gift and every perfect gift comes down from the Father of lights, and everything that we have is in fact a gift. But we forget that. We say, no, it belongs to me. I'm going to do with my life what I want. I'm going to, fulfill whatever desires I want to have. And I'm just going to use what's been given to me. And we're neither grateful for it, nor do we acknowledge that it's a gift. And that if it is a gift, it's really, we find that the gift is available to us only when we're kind of plugged in to God. I'm going to talk about the image of that Christ gives us of from John's gospel about the vine and branches, where Christ says, I am the vine, you're the branches. So long as you abide in me, you can bear fruit. And so long as we abide in Christ, we're nurtured by the vine and by the roots and all. But when we claim our autonomy, when we claim our individualism, and what we functionally do is we cut ourselves off from the vine, and then we expect to bear fruit. We find that no, that's not what happens when we're cut off from Christ. We wither, we shrivel up, and we die. That's what happens when we claim our own autonomy, when we claim our essence, our ousia, when we claim our lives and try to be autonomous and live life on our own terms, rather than live them in communion with Christ and in communion with his church. Okay, we cut ourselves off from the taproot of grace, from the source of all life, which is God, and we find that we do wither. Okay, and so that's what happens. So it says that what the son did is that he went off into a far country, and it says, and there he wasted his possessions. The Greek term is diascorpisen ousianavtu, that he scattered his substance. He scattered his very essence in prodigal living. And prodigal living means loose living. So, in the old days, we talked about wine, women, and song. Nowadays, we talk about drug, sex, and rock and roll. Okay. And that's basically what he did with himself. He scattered his whole substance. Okay. So, what we have here um, is he is, and here's where again I want really to remind us of the passage in John's Gospel where Christ says, "He is the vine, we are the branches. We abide in him, we bear much fruit, but apart from him, we can do nothing." So the young son goes into a far country. The Holy Fathers tell us that the far country we understand is to be far away from God's grace. We go away to a far place away from God's grace. We leave the Father's house. We leave the Father's house and we go someplace else. And in the patristic interpretation of the passage, who is the ruler in the far country that puts him to work? That's the devil. And he puts him to work doing what? Feeding pigs, which are unclean in Jewish thought. That's like the worst possible job you can have. I mean, if you've ever been driven by a pig farm, you know what the stench is like. And I mean, and having to put up with that, day in and day out, and then imagine being in an environment like that and then being jealous of what the fact that the pigs are eating. They're like, it says, pods. They were carob husks, no nutritional value. But he was desperate to eat even what these filthy pigs were eating, and nobody gave him anything. And that's what happens to us when we find ourselves caught in our passions. We're cut off from Christ. We no longer receive, the nutrition, the grace that we receive from the vine who is Christ, and we find ourselves in desperate situation where there's nothing to feed us, and we find ourselves hungry. Please remember also, for those of you who have had any experience with any kind of addictive behavior, whether that be with porn, with alcohol, with weed, if you're a workaholic, or you spend all weekend watching sports ball because you can't deal with your relatives or your wife or your kids or something, you find that if you have any kind of addictive pattern, you get so much of something because you need that much of it in order to feel good about yourself. And soon that's not enough. And you always need more and more and more in order to satisfy your need. This is the way all addictions work, and this is what we find in the case of the prodigal son. He's far away. There's no source of life and nutrition, and he needs more and more and more, and he's not finding it. He finds himself starving in a far place. And dissipation of his essence is autonomous self-possession. The kid did not acknowledge that he was dependent upon his father. He didn't want to be dependent anymore. He wanted to be independent and autonomous. And this is why he begins to wither. Further, in a little deeper Orthodox understanding of this, when we talk about scattering of things, the Holy Fathers, particularly the fathers in the Philokalia, talk about the scattering of the mind. Okay, the Jesus prayer and attentiveness, um, watchfulness is a term that's used in our spirituality. In fact, the title of the Philokalia in Greek is the Philokalia ton niptikon pateron. That is the Philokalia of the watchful fathers, the attentive fathers, the ones who are able to bring their minds into unity and to concentrate and to be present with God. When we dissipate our mind, when our mind and our attention is dissipated and scattered out, This is the way that we find ourselves largely in the world. It's why we can't concentrate. It's why we find it difficult to pray. It's why we find ourselves, difficult even in concentrating on work, or why. I don't know. You ever do this? You come to a traffic light and you find yourself reaching for your phone so that you can scroll your phone just because you can't sit for 30 seconds at a traffic light without being distracted. I found myself doing that the other day. I made myself quit because okay, I don't want to end up that I see what's happening to me here, and I don't want to give in to that. But you have to watch for those sorts of things. Okay. But this is the scattering of the mind. And when the mind is not focused on God and is not simple and concentrated, it's scattered out into all kinds of things in the world. All right. Father Maximus Costas, who's a contemporary theologian. He's an Athonite monk. I think he's teaching at Holy Cross School of Theology in the Greek school. He's also the translator of the volumes of St. Maximus the Confessor. He's quite a good guy. But he talks about the scattering of the mind, this diascorpizo, the same word used in the prodigal, the parable son, this dissipation. When it occurs, the mind dissipates because it concentrates on bodily things and on worldly things. And the major way that this is happening nowadays and how it's accelerated and made our spirituality all the more difficult is because the distraction that we find, particularly in social media, when we're doom scrolling our phones, when we're reaching for them at the traffic light, it's these sorts of things that keeping the mind constantly going from one thing to another, flitting and unable to concentrate or be present for anything is becoming it's not just a matter of lack of attention. It is fundamentally undermining our very spirituality because we cannot be present with God. We're training our minds not to be able to focus or to remain simple and uncompounded. They have to be scattered in a variety of things. I don't know about you, but I've commented to my congregation that Sunday morning liturgy, about that 90 minutes in liturgy, is the longest time in the entire week that people go without looking at their phones. 90 minutes on Sunday morning is about it. And I even have a couple of people who like to look up the daily troparion on their phone, and they're still there with their noses in their phone in liturgy. I'm about to slap the damn things out of their hands. Um, They really do. I give them a printed handout. They got the Chopard and the Kentuckian if they want it. They don't need to be on their phones. But you see the dependency that's been created. This substantially undermines our spirituality. And so just to throw it in here, I'll put this out to you. The ability to resist the distraction and the attraction or the addictive quality of our phones and social media is, I think, a necessary early step in restoring Orthodox spirituality. And in fact, every fasting season that comes around, I encourage my people to take a digital fast in addition to the physical fast. So I'm going to do that again when Nativity fast comes up. Take the social media off your phone, quit posting, quit looking. And, maybe if your job requires it of you, okay, but there are things you can do. If you can, there is in the settings on your phone a way of turning the color off of your screen to where your screen appears only in black and white. You can set it that way. And studies have shown that people look at their phone about 35% less if it's in black and white than it is in color because it's not as attractive to us. So you would retain the functionality of your phone when you need it, but you won't be looking at it quite so much. So there are some little tricks that way, you know. And if you want to see how bad it is, I mean, there's also a function in the settings. Go and look and see how much time you spent on your phone in the last 24 hours or the last day and see how much lost productivity you have. Okay. You will be surprised at what you've done. Listen, if something is free online, it's because you are the product.
Right.
You are what's being sold. It's your attention that's being sold to somebody else. All right. Yeah. Just think about that for a moment. Distraction is the original sin of the mind. Okay. And this goes back to the fathers. Theodokos Sophotiki says our natural perceptive faculty, that is the mind, is single, but split into two different modes as a result of Adam's dependency. St. Gregory Palamas says after the fall, our inner being naturally adapts itself to outward forms, which are multiple and distracted. And so the digital fragmentation of our hearts mirrors the false scattering of the mind as well. Okay, so this is what we have here. So it's not just that the prodigal son disperses his substance. It's not just money, but the wealth of the soul, our spiritual inheritance, our very being is what's being scattered here. And here, I'm sorry, I can't help myself. I have a broad liberal arts education, and it reminds me of a William Butler Yeats poem, The Second Coming. I'll give you the first part of it. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, and the worst are full of passionate intensity. What better describes our world today? You know, there it is. And even this, I even remember, do you remember, y'all read The Lord of the Rings? I assume you've read The Lord of the Rings. If you haven't read The Lord of the Rings, go read The Lord of the Rings now. Okay. You can start with The Hobbit. It's not bad. The Hobbit is a children's story, but The Lord of the Rings is not. All right. But there is a passage in there a couple of times where Frodo has put on the ring a couple of times, and Gandalf is looking at Frodo, and he notices that there seemed to be, this was at Weathertop. I'll quote you the passage. There seemed to be little wrong with him, but to the wizard's eye, there was a faint change, just a hint, as it were, of transparency about him, and especially about the left hand that lay outside upon the coverlet. So the scene is in Rivendell, where he's gone after he was wounded. He was stabbed on Weathertop by the ring wraiths. And Gandalf is noticing that Frodo is beginning to fade. And we remember, if you remember the story, the ring wraiths themselves, the 9 ring wraiths, were completely immaterial. And Frodo, having used the ring and with the poison blade of the ring wraiths in the tip of it still stuck in him, he is beginning to fade. And it's an literary image, but it points to a deeper truth that we have in our Orthodox understanding of good and evil. And it's directly tied to this story of the prodigal son, because what we have is, if our ousia is what is scattered in our in loose living or prodigal living, in sin and in passion, it points to our fundamental understanding that good and evil are not two different things that we can pick. There is only good, and anything that's evil is going to
Yeah.
be a falling away or a lessening of the good. So it's a matter of a scale. So if absolute good is like 100%, absolute evil is like 0% of good. And the less that we have of good, the less substantial that we ourselves are. So the further we are from God, we're not only just more evil or more removed from God or in a further country, we actually become less substantial. Our very essence becomes less. And the further we fall away from God, the less real we are, until, like the ring race, they fade away completely. That's the beauty in that metaphor, in that story. As Frodo becomes involved in evil, he begins to fade. We begin to fade away, and we cease to be fully human and fully real the further we fall away from God. Isn't that a terrible thing to think about? No? I'd invite your reflections or your comments on that. Am I speaking English? Am I making sense here? I can see some of you. Okay, this is what happens to us when we give into evil, especially when it becomes habitual. We become less substantial, less real than we would be if we were living more virtuous lives. And so if we want to be more substantially real and more fully human, we have to be virtuous. And this is part of what's natural. I mean, this is the whole purpose of all Orthodox observance, is to help us overcome the passions, to overcome our sins so that we can become fully human and closer to God. And so as we grow in virtue, we become more substantial, more real, more fundamentally human. And there actually is like more of us. We become somehow, it's hard to find a right word, ontologically dense. I suppose in some way that there's just more reality to us. And I don't know if you've encountered people who are more mature and kind of have their act together, especially if they're righteous or holy people. There's a depth, there's a weightiness to them, even if they're friendly and accommodating and easy to approach and all. There's still something weighty and real about them in a way that isn't so. I remember it, if I can gather wool for just a moment. I remember that about my late spiritual father, Archimandrite Roman Braga. His the cause for his glorification has recently been put forward by the Romanian Episcopate in the Orthodox Church in America, and we may well see his glorification as a saint in the next few years. But I remember just being with him. He was always very simple. He was always very friendly and very childlike. But like every word, there was weight and power behind it, and you just knew that there was a whole lot more to this frail little old Romanian man than met the eye. There was a depth and a weight to him. And that's a beautiful thing to see. And that's how it can be with us. That's what we want to be. So just be careful, with the social media, with the endless scrolling, with anything that's out there that wants to harvest your attention, because it's ultimately not doing you any good.
Men are in crisis. And men are in crisis because they don't know who they are or what they were created for. It affects their lives in big ways. You were not meant to struggle alone. Step out of the chaos. Discover the man that God created you to be. We challenge you. Join us. You will discover a life worth living. Join the Brotherhood.